met Diane 5 years after my first wife, Laura, passed away. Losing Laura broke me in ways I can't describe. She was my first love, the mother of my 2 kids, Ethan and Lily. They were 12 and 10 when cancer took her from us. For years, our house felt like a museum of memories. Then Diane came into my life. She was kind, patient, and gentle with my grief. She had a daughter from a previous marriage, Rachel. Rachel was 18 when we got married. Old enough to have opinions, too young to see past them. She made it clear from day one that I wasn't her father. She called me Mom's husband. Never stepdad. Never family. I didn't push. I thought if I stayed kind, she'd come around. But kindness meant nothing to her. She built a wall and lived behind it proudly. At dinner, she barely spoke. At holidays, she'd vanish into her room. She never joined us for photos or family trips. Diane said she just needed time. I believed her because I wanted to. Ethan and Lily were polite to Rachel. They tried to include her, invite her to join them. But she always found a reason to say no. Once, I offered to help with her college applications. She said, "I'll ask my real dad if I need help." Her real dad hadn't called her in years. Still, she used him as a shield to push me away. I learned to accept it quietly. When she went off to college, she barely called. She'd call Diane sometimes, short, polite, distant. Birthdays, maybe a quick text. That was it. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lily stayed close. They visited every weekend, brought friends home. When I started dating Diane, they welcomed her with open hearts. We shared dinners, laughter, normalcy. Rachel was the missing piece who didn't want to belong. Over the years, nothing changed. Diane and I celebrated anniversaries, bought a new house, built a steady life. Rachel came by only for holidays, stayed long enough to be noticed. Even then, she kept her distance, eyes on her phone, smiles forced. I told Diane once, "She doesn't hate me, she just refuses to see me." Diane sighed and said, "She's protecting herself." Protecting herself from what? From love, from family, from the idea that her mother moved on. Maybe that was it. Maybe she never forgave Diane for remarrying. I tried not to take it personally. But it's hard to ignore someone who lives in your house and looks through you. Years passed. Rachel grew up, got married, had kids. She never called me dad. Her children never called me grandpa. And I never pushed for it. I bought them Christmas gifts, sent birthday cards, stayed civil. But in her world, I was still just the man who married her mother. And that's how it stayed, cold, polite, and quietly painful. Until the day she came back into our lives, smiling like nothing had happened. That's when everything started to unravel. It started right after I mentioned updating my will. Diane had told Rachel, in passing, that we'd met with a lawyer. Within a week, Rachel called me out of nowhere. Her voice was soft, almost nervous, too careful. "Hey, Dad," she said, like the word had always belonged to her. It hit me strange. For 20 years, I was invisible, and now suddenly I was Dad. She invited us for dinner at her house. It was the first invitation in a decade. Diane was thrilled. She thought maybe Rachel was finally changing. I wanted to believe it too. We went. Her husband, Steve, greeted me with a handshake and a forced smile. The night was polite, awkward, filled with small talk. Rachel laughed too loud at everything I said. She kept asking about my health, my plans, my future. I could smell the motive through the politeness. Still, I played along. Sometimes silence reveals more than confrontation. After that night, Rachel started calling every few days. She sent pictures of her kids. She invited us over to spend time as a family. Diane was overjoyed. I stayed quiet. I've lived long enough to know fake affection when I see it. It didn't take long before the topic of money appeared. One afternoon, she said, I just want things to be fair, you know. I asked what she meant. She smiled and said, "Your house, your will, I just hope you treat all of us equally." I said, "Of course, everything will be fair." But my definition of fair and hers were not the same. To me, fairness meant respecting history and truth. To her, fairness meant profit. The next time we met, she pushed harder. We were at a family barbecue when she cornered me near the porch. "Dad, can we talk?" she began, all sweetness. Then she said it. "I was thinking maybe my kids could have your old house someday." I froze. That house wasn't just property. It was the home, Laura, and I built from nothing. It was where Ethan and Lily grew up, where every photo still holds her face. Rachel knew that. She knew exactly what that house meant. And yet she wanted to claim it as a prize. I looked her in the eye and said, "That house is already spoken for." She frowned, voice sharp. "So you're punishing me for the past?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting what matters." Her eyes turned cold, like a door slamming shut. She left early that day, dragging her kids by the hand. After that, the calls grew colder. But she didn't give up. Her tone shifted again, back to sweetness, back to Dad. She started visiting unannounced, bringing cookies, smiles, and guilt. Diane wanted to see hope in it. I only saw calculation. Rachel had finally come back into my life. Not out of love, but because she'd learned there was something left to take. It all came to a head at my granddaughter Bella's birthday party. She had just turned 7, a bright, sweet kid full of imagination. I'd built her a wooden jewelry box shaped like a castle. Painted it purple and silver, carved her name on the lid. When she opened it, her face lit up like the sun. She hugged me tight, called me the best grandpa ever. Everyone smiled. Except Rachel. Her expression froze, the kind of tight smile that hides a storm. She whispered something to Steve, and I knew trouble was brewing. I ignored it. But later that evening, after most guests had left, she cornered me. "So Bella gets a handmade gift, huh?" she said, voice sharp. I nodded. She loves princess stuff. I thought she'd enjoy it. Rachel laughed, cold and bitter. "Of course, your real grandkids get special treatment." Her words hit like a slap. I stayed calm. "Rachel, I've always been respectful to you and your kids," I said. "You made it clear years ago that I wasn't family. I accepted that." She rolled her eyes. "Maybe if you tried harder, things would have been different." That stopped me. Tried harder. I'd spent years offering kindness she threw away. Now she was rewriting history. "Rachel," I said quietly, "I never owed you anything but respect." Her tone rose, sharp and angry. "You ignored my kids. You spoil Ethan's and Lily's children, but not mine. You made me feel like an outsider. You always played favorites. And don't think I don't know what's in that will." That was the moment the truth spilled out. This wasn't about love. It was about inheritance. I looked her straight in the eye. "So that's what this is really about. You're pretending to care for money." She didn't deny it. Just crossed her arms and muttered, "You've always been cold." Before I could respond, Diane walked in, sensing the tension. Rachel grabbed her kids and stormed out. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Rachel had written a long post in the family group chat. She claimed I had excluded her and mistreated her children. That I used affection as a weapon. Diane was devastated. Ethan and Lily, though, didn't stay silent. Ethan replied first. "You ignored Dad for 20 years. Don't act like the victim now." Lily added, "Our kids call him Grandpa because he's been there. Yours don't because you told them not to." The group chat went silent after that. Some relatives tried to stay neutral. Others sent me private messages of support. Diane said little, but I saw the shift in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't rush to defend Rachel. That night she whispered, "Maybe I've been blind." I didn't say I told you so. I just sat there, tired, staring at my phone. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Rachel had lost her mask, and she wasn't done yet. A week after the birthday fight, I got a call from my lawyer. He said Rachel had contacted an attorney to question my will. They wanted clarification about the property distribution. Specifically, about the old house where Ethan and Lily grew up. The same house Rachel tried to claim at the barbecue. Her lawyer argued it might be marital property. A desperate stretch, but a predictable one. They were hoping I'd panic and back down. Instead, my lawyer reminded them about the forfeiture clause. Anyone who contested my will would lose everything. That shut them up fast. But the damage was already spreading through the family. Rachel started calling Diane every day, crying on the phone. She said I was tearing the family apart, that I was poisoning Diane against her own daughter. Then she called Diane's sister, her cousins, her old friends. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. You're being too harsh. She's trying to make amends. Why not just let it go? Easy advice from people who had no idea what really happened. Diane tried to stay calm at first, but the guilt started creeping in. I'd find her sitting at the table, phone in hand, staring into space. She'd sigh and say, "They just don't understand." I told her, "You don't have to justify anything. You know the truth." She nodded, but the doubt was there. Rachel was clever. She didn't just attack me. She attacked through Diane's heart. She played the role of the wounded daughter perfectly. Her tears came easy when the audience was right. One night, Diane sat me down. She said, "Maybe we're being too rigid, for the kids' sake." I felt the sting of those words. I asked her, "You mean the same kids she told for years I wasn't family?" Diane looked away. "She's trying now," she whispered. "No," I said, "she's scheming now." The silence that followed was heavy. We barely spoke the rest of the evening. For the first time, Rachel's manipulation reached inside our home. It was no longer just about property. It was about control. Over the next weeks, the calls from relatives increased. They repeated Rachel's lines like rehearsed dialogue. Family over money. Be the bigger man. I stopped replying. Instead, I focused on locking everything down legally. My lawyer reviewed every clause, every detail. He said, "You're covered, but she'll keep pushing emotionally." He was right. Rachel had lost the legal battle, but she wasn't done fighting. Now she wanted to win through guilt, through sympathy, through wearing Diane down until one of us broke. But I'd already decided something long ago. You can lose money and rebuild. But once you lose your dignity to manipulation, it never comes back. I wasn't giving her that victory. Not this time. Rachel's next move was darker than I expected. It started with late-night texts from Steve. At first, he sounded calm, reasonable, almost diplomatic. "This family is breaking apart over a house," he wrote. "Be the bigger man, Mark. Make things right." I didn't answer. 2 days later, another message came. "You wouldn't want this to turn ugly, would you?" That was no longer negotiation. That was a threat. I took screenshots and sent them to my lawyer. He said, "Don't respond, keep every message." So I did. Then came the phone calls. Rachel told Diane I'd threatened them. She said Steve was just trying to talk sense into me. Diane looked torn, confused, scared of what to believe. I showed her the messages. She went quiet and said, "I don't know her anymore." I thought it would end there. It didn't. A week later, one of my tenants called, panicked. A couple showed up at the rental house claiming ownership. They told the tenants there was a family transfer happening. Their names, Rachel and Steve. They demanded rent payments start going to them instead. Luckily, my tenants were smart enough to call me first. They even recorded part of it on their door camera. Steve's voice was smug, rehearsed, threatening. It's in your best interest to cooperate now rather than later. I was furious but calm. My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter the same day. He also informed the tenants, in writing, that ownership hadn't changed. I filed a trespass report with the local police. That should have scared them off. But instead, they doubled down. 2 days later, police showed up at my door. Someone had filed a child welfare report against me. They claimed my home was unsafe for visiting grandchildren. The officer was polite but skeptical. He checked the house, found nothing wrong, and apologized. He even said, "This looks like a false report, sir." I nodded. I already knew who did it. That night, Diane sat beside me, pale and shaking. She said, "Steve's lost it. I don't know what Rachel is thinking anymore." I told her, "She's thinking about winning, no matter who she hurts." Then Rachel sent invitations for a family healing dinner. Printed cards, fancy venue, catered meal, all for show. I refused to go. I told Diane, "That's not dinner, it's an ambush." 2 days later, Rachel posted an open letter on Facebook. She wrote, "I forgive my stepfather for the pain he's caused." She called me bitter, cold, broken by the past. The comments poured in. Cousins, old friends, strangers, all praising her courage. Diane's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Even Ethan and Lily were disgusted. They said, "She's using social media as her weapon now." Then Rachel crossed the final line. She sent Diane a document to sign, for clarity. It said all family property should be divided equally. A legal trap in plain sight. I told Diane, "If you sign that, we're done talking about this." She didn't sign. For the first time, she looked at me with full understanding. And for the first time, I saw in her eyes that Rachel had finally gone too far. The morning after Diane refused to sign, I called my lawyer again. I told him I wanted to make the will permanent, no loopholes left. He updated everything exactly as I asked. Rachel and her children were removed entirely. No inheritance, no claim, no sympathy clause. The forfeiture rule stayed, contest it, and lose everything. We also documented Rachel and Steve's harassment legally. My lawyer called it a shield for the future. He sent one final cease and desist letter to both of them. It warned of civil action if they ever contacted me again. That night, I sent one last family-wide email. It was short, final, and calm. Rachel and Steve's actions have severed my trust completely. They are no longer part of my estate plan or my home. Anyone who supports this behavior is not welcome here. I hit send and closed my laptop. Ethan and Lily replied within minutes, telling me they stood by me. A few cousins complained about family unity. I ignored them. Family doesn't mean allowing people to bleed you dry. A few days later, Diane admitted quietly, "You were right." Her voice cracked when she said it. "I just wish it didn't have to end like this." I told her, "So do I." For a while, the house felt heavy with silence. We didn't talk about Rachel, didn't mention her name. But one afternoon, Diane said she was going to visit the grandkids. Rachel's grandkids, not mine. I told her, "Be careful. She's not finished playing games." Diane sighed and said, "I'll keep it short." When she came back that evening, her face was pale. She didn't speak for a while. Then she whispered, "It's over." She said Rachel accused her of being weak and brainwashed. That she'd traded her real daughter for a dead man's family. And then Rachel screamed, "You'll regret this when he's gone." That was the moment Diane finally broke. She stood up, told Rachel she was done. She said, "You threw this family away years ago. And now you're crying because there's nothing left to take." Then she left Rachel's house for good. When she came home, she sat next to me on the couch. Her hands were trembling, but her voice was calm. "She's not family anymore," Diane said. "Not until she remembers what that word means." We didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. It wasn't victory, it was exhaustion. Rachel had taken 20 years of bitterness and burned the bridge herself. Now there was nothing left to fix. Days turned into weeks. Life settled into quiet again. Ethan and Lily visited with their kids. We laughed, cooked, shared stories, tried to feel normal. The storm had passed, but the scars remained. I looked at Diane one night and said softly, "It's finally done." She nodded, eyes tired but peaceful. And for the first time in a long while, I believed her. The door was closed. Not in anger. In peace. The months that followed were quiet, almost still. No more phone calls, no letters, no drama. Rachel and Steve disappeared from our lives completely. The silence they left behind was strangely peaceful. Ethan and Lily visited often, bringing laughter back into the house. Their kids ran through the yard like sunlight after a long storm. Diane smiled more, even if her eyes still carried sadness. We didn't speak Rachel's name anymore. It wasn't anger, just acceptance. Some doors, once closed, aren't meant to open again. I still kept the old house, the one full of memories. Sometimes I drive by and sit in front of it. Not with regret, but with gratitude. That house survived love, loss, and betrayal. It was proof that not everything can be stolen. Family isn't defined by blood or paperwork. It's defined by who shows up when life gets hard. Rachel chose distance, the rest chose love. And in the end, that was enough. I've learned peace isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about knowing when to stop reopening the wound. The chapter is closed. The story is done. And I'm finally free.